In the last few days, Iran has shown again why it can't be trusted. Iran insists on maintaining its formidable nuclear capabilities with which it could produce nuclear weapons. Iran insists on removing all sanctions immediately, and Iran refuses to allow effective inspections of all its suspect facilities. At the same time, Iran continues its unbridled aggression in the region and its worldwide terrorism in the world. So let me reiterate again the two main components of the alternative to this bad deal. First, instead of allowing Iran to preserve and develop its nuclear capabilities, a better deal would significantly roll back these capabilities. For example, by shutting down the illicit underground facilities that Iran concealed for years from the international community. Second, instead of lifting the restrictions on Iran's nuclear facilities and program at a fixed date, a better deal would link the lifting of these restrictions to an end of Iran's aggression in the region, its worldwide terrorism, and its threats to annihilate Israel. Iran needs a deal more than anyone. Instead of making dangerous concessions to Iran, now is the time for the international community to reassert and fortify its original demands for a better deal. We must not allow Iran, the foremost sponsor of global terrorism, to have an easy path to nuclear weapons, which will threaten the entire world. Thank you.
Please welcome the former Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. How are you today, Mr. Prime Minister?
I'm fine.
Is that what I should refer to you as? Because I know you've had many jobs in the Israeli government, foreign minister and prime minister and finance minister, UN ambassador.
Now, Bill, you want to start with a quarrel? You want to call me prime minister? I'm not going to argue with you.
No, and I know when Israeli politicians come to the United States, it usually means they're trying to get their old job back.
No, actually, it doesn't, because America is of interest to us, whether in opposition or in government. America is important for everyone.
But you do want your old job back?
Yes, I do.
Well, that's the kind of honesty we don't have here in America from our politicians. And I have heard you referred to many times as the most Americanized of the Israeli prime ministers. Do you find that to be a compliment?
If by that it means that you talk straight to your audience, I'll tell you what, I spent a few, yes, I would, but it's supposed to be derogatory because the idea of communicating with voters was an abstruse and alien idea in the party system that we had, which was more or less Tammany Hall. That was an American idea, too, that went by the wayside for a new American politics, and I prefer the new one with all its failings to the old one with all its corruptions.
Well, I don't know if we've gotten rid of all our corruption.
No, you haven't.
But I'll tell you one thing. Unlike America, Israel seems to be able to fight wars very quickly. What is your secret? Because we don't seem to have the hang of that.
The secret is that we have America.
Nah.
And America, you see, the point is that Israel, when it fights, is subject to international pressures, and the people who are fighting us are subject to international pressures. In fact, the kind of wars that we fight cannot last forever. They're either won or lost or drawn, but they end, and they end fairly quickly in the televised age. They're not sustainable beyond a few weeks. And I said as much on the first day of the Second Lebanon War. That's what we call it now. I said we have a limited time. Some Israeli politician actually said the hourglass is ticking. That's what they said. The hourglass is ticking. And I said, well, yeah, the clock is ticking, and that's why you should get as decisive a victory as you can in the shortest amount of time. The time factor is real for a country like Israel fighting a war. It's less real for a country like the United States.
But this is not over between you and Hezbollah. This is just halftime.
It's not between us and Hezbollah.
It's not between you and Hezbollah?
No.
Who is it between?
Us and Iran, you and Iran,
Right.
the rest of the world and Iran. Hezbollah doesn't exist. People are clapping for Iran?
No, they're clapping that they think you got it right.
Well, I'm glad because...
They, and I do too.
Well, Bill, I want to clarify what I mean by that. I think it's important. Look, Hezbollah I'm quite sure, kidnapped these three soldiers without getting clearance from their masters in Tehran. But once the fighting got going, they were essentially a forward unit of the Iranian army. They were trained by the Iranian army on Iranian soil, using Iranian weapons, using Iranian tactics, and their long-range weapons are controlled by Iranian officers. So this is a forward unit of the Iranian army, and therefore when we talk about Hezbollah, we're really asking, what does Iran want? It wanted a diversion from its nuclear weapons program, and it got it. But right now, I think it wants quiet because it wants to somehow pursue the completion of its plan to build atomic bombs, from which they intend to bomb us out of existence, but bomb many people and annihilate.
But they would never bomb you, would they? Because they know that you would hit them back. I've never understood why Israel is so coy about nuclear weapons. I mean, I know you have them. You know you have them. I think most countries that have nuclear weapons, probably they were built by Jewish scientists or the Chinese kid. But it's unrealistic to think that Israel doesn't have nuclear weapons or would not use them for its survival. So why be cagey about it?
Well, I think that, let's suppose for a second, I'm going to avoid answering this question, okay? Here, I'm being openly evasive.
Okay.
So now having dispatched with that, let me address the other side of the equation of your question. Iran, you think, ought to perform or ought to act the way the Soviet Union acted. The Soviet Union had nuclear weapons, the U.S. had nuclear weapons, and so there was a standoff, and in fact a nuclear peace established, right?
Yes.
Now, so you'd think, well, wouldn't Iran behave like the Soviet Union? Except that the Soviet Union and the Soviet communists in general always put their survival before their ideology, before their zealotry. You cannot rely on militant Islam, a militant Islamic regime like Iran to behave the same way. For example, you remember any Soviet suicide bombers? No. But militant Islam produces hordes of them, and they smash into buildings in New York, bringing down towers, smashing into the Pentagon. Now you had some people who were willing to blow themselves up, blow their children up to bring down aircraft. This is a pathological creed, and it may be that the current leadership of Iran, which is a mad purist, Islamic fantasist, that would say, well, you know, we can get to heaven in a mad apocalyptic apocalypse where millions die on both sides. A disappeared imam, a religious holy man from about 1,000 years ago, would reappear. Millions would die on both sides, but the millions, the Islamic millions, would go to a Islamic heaven with all the trimmings, and you know that's not a bad heaven for them. So you think this is crazy? People can't really think that way. People can't re-engage in religious wars. That disappeared 300 years ago from mankind, or did it? Well, you have these people smashing into the World Trade Center. You have these incredible things happening because these people really mean it. And you cannot have these madmen acquiring atomic bombs because all the nuclear powers that you mentioned up to now have a control over the button. They are not mad. They understand the limits of the use of this weapon. That is not true of Iran. That's why it should not be allowed to develop nuclear weapons.
Okay.
I am furious at this entire situation. I would love to just spend a lot of my time venting and yelling at people.